also your mic as well as your camera. I'm going to ask that you in the chat function, you raise your points of order if you wish to, and then in terms of posing questions, please use the raise your hand function. I will then identify you. When you are given the platform to speak, you may switch on your mic as well as your video camera if you wish to. I want to extend a heartfelt welcome to everybody who has joined this meeting, and I want to also extend it to the media if they are on the platform, as well as members of the public who are on the who is in the meeting via the YouTube channel. I also like to extend members, today is a meeting with the Department of Public Works as well as WCED. As you know, we are going to look at the infrastructure of our schools, and the Department of Public Works is going to do that presentation. WCED is present to answer on our questions as well as Public Works. I want to also then extend the welcome to the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Works and Transport, Member Dalen Mitchell. At this point in time, I'm going to say Lorraine Botha is my name, and I'm the chairperson for the Standing Committee. Members, I'm giving you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Thereafter, I will go to WCED to introduce whoever is on the platform, as well as the Department of Public Works and Transport. Thank you.
Chairperson, further questions? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and Gillian Post.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, Khalid Sayed.
Good afternoon, Regan Allen.
Good afternoon, Chair Dalen Mitchell.
Thank you very much. With us, we have Wasima Hassan Musa, who is our procedural officer, and we have Mr. Ben Daza, who is our senior procedural officer. I'm going to go then to the Department of Education.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, honourable members. Sally Abrams, Deputy Director General Education Planning, responsible for Programme 6 Infrastructure. Good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon all. I'm Leslie McLean. I'm the Chief Director of Physical Resources for the Western Cape Education Department.
Good afternoon, Chair and members, colleagues. My name is Gavin Code. I'm Deputy Director General for Public Works in the Department of Transport and Public Works. I also apologise for the head of department, Jackie Gooch. She's stuck in an extended cabinet meeting at the moment and would have liked to have been here, but couldn't, unfortunately.
Good afternoon, Chair and honourable members, fellow colleagues. My name is Liam Thiel. I'm here on behalf of Department of Transport and Public Works, Chief Directorate Education Infrastructure. We're the implementers for WCED's infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. All be welcomed. I'm just checking with Mr. Code and Mr. Thiel, who is doing the presentation.
Chair, Chief Director Liam Thiel will be doing the presentation.
Thank you very much. Then without any further ado, Mr. Thiel, I'm giving over to you to start with the presentation, sir. Sorry, before you start, members, I just need to render an apology for Member Karma. He's not in this meeting today. Thank you. Mr. Thiel, it's over to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, honourable members. The presentation that was distributed, I'll present slide by slide. Chair, I imagine we should run through it, or would you like me to stop after each slide?
I would want you to do the whole presentation, and then thereafter we can do the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm just sharing the presentation. And can everybody see the slides?
Mr. Teal, yes, we can see the slide.
Okay, I'll just enlarge them. Okay, there we are. Thank you. All right, thank you very much, honourable members, for the invitation and the opportunity to report on the status of infrastructure of schools in the Western Cape. We try to keep it short and to the point in terms of the 4 items that you've raised in your letter of September and then the confirmation for the meeting in October. Okay, page down. Okay, the first question was the construction works delayed due to lockdown. Schools in the province were obviously closed for holidays 15 March of 2020, but soon after the initial lockdown, levels 5 to 1 followed from the 26th of March, which meant that all school construction works being implemented at that time had to cease in order to comply with the regulations. At the lockdown level 4, from the 1st of May, the public works infrastructure projects were permitted to resume, and the following projects were resumed. All projects implemented by our department and committed to construction. The capital projects, new and replacement schools, upgrades and additions program, and some of the other programs as well as corrective or emergency maintenance projects on those sites operated by WCED, but only from the 26th of May. This was due to arrangements that was necessary also with the schools. Note that the preventative scheduled maintenance projects remained in abeyance due to requiring WCED consent to access WCED operated sites. At that time, those were still closed. On the implementation of lockdown level 3 on the 4th of June, Department of Education confirmed the consent for our department to proceed with all other construction projects which enable preventative, or as we call it, scheduled maintenance projects to continue. The replacement school projects are listed as follows. The 9 projects that we initiated and implemented on behalf of education for completion during the 2020-21 fiscal year are Crestway Secondary School, Dias Primary School, Harmony Primary School, Kwafaku Primary School, PC Peterson Primary School, Panorama Primary School number 2, Sunray Primary School, Willows Primary School, and Woodlands Primary School. To date, the following 4 of the above 9 projects have achieved first phase of completion of building facilities, with site works to follow as a second phase. Crestway Secondary School during December last year, Kwafaku Primary School during June this year, as well as Woodlands Primary School, and Dias Primary School during August this year. The remaining 5 projects are planned to achieve completion during this financial year, and that would be for the first phase of the building facilities only. The second phase, usually the remainder of the site works, after any temporary structures or previous buildings were removed, would then follow to be completed in the second phase. The 5 projects are Panorama Primary School number 2, expected during October in this month, Sunray Primary School November, Harmony Primary School in December before the builder's holiday, Willows Primary School in January, and the PC Peterson Primary School during March in next year. The maintenance side, the preventative maintenance projects planned for construction during the current fiscal year. There are 131 projects that were originally planned before COVID disaster dispensation was declared. 95 of the originally planned projects were postponed due to subsequent budget constraints as a result of a budget reprioritization. 36 projects currently planned to commence and continue with construction during the fiscal year have indeed commenced. The impact of COVID-19 on the adjusted budget. And Chair and honourable members, I omitted in the beginning to confirm that this presentation was consulted and agreed and prepared with WCED. So the numbers that we indicate here are the combined numbers for both of our departments, each obviously slightly different perspectives. The adjustment budget that was tabled in July 2020, appropriation for infrastructure development, 1.748 billion. The adjusted appropriation was reduced by 344 million to 1.404 billion. Allocation for our department for implemented projects. The initial allocation was 1.194 billion, and the adjusted allocation was reduced with 193 million to 1.001 billion. The budget for the replacement school program, the expenditure projection on our side of 257 million represents an optimistic estimated cash flow at 100% with no risk scenario attached to it. In agreement with WCED and the uncertainty about the actual progress that can be made on the various sites, and with taking into account the historic statistics of our progress and the delays that are caused outside of the control of our two departments or outside of the control of any of the contractors, it was then agreed that the budget allocation should be less by up to 50% at 141.85 million. And this takes into account the high risk scenario in which we find ourselves today with COVID still being present. This table just summarizes the maintenance and replacement school budgets pre-COVID and post-COVID. And then the impact of COVID on the prioritization, the allocation of funding and the postponement of projects are as follows. The schools that have been postponed are Rio Grande Primary School, Manenberg Primary School, Ocean View Elsen, Uitzicht Primary School, Larihigo Primary School, Pakkalsdorp Senior Secondary School, Montague Gifts Primary School, Inkanini Primary School, De Waalwil Primary School. Additional information pertaining to the infrastructure of schools outlined for this financial year up to 2023 obviously are risk related, and the following items indicates the considerations. The risks going forward. There are clear indications of additional costs relating to the implementation of COVID-19 regulations on sites. Similarly to our own offices, the construction industry are required to provide personal protective equipment, screening devices. The delays of projects across the portfolio due to observing lockdown regulations during level 5 and resuming works at level 4 through to 1. Reduced productivity on sites due to having to comply with COVID screening and social distancing, leading to potential further delays in completion. Additional costs associated with materials in short supply, price increases in view of the manufacturing industry also being affected, strained manufacturing and supply of building materials to sites due to ad hoc shutdowns to deal with COVID-related prescripts, meaning that any of the sites or even the supplier might have to shut down when there are cause for infections. And due to the high volatility and uncertainty in the present environment, forecasting expenditure is strained. Mitigation is to shift funding to programs where there is adequate flexibility, for example, corrective maintenance, in order to rapidly implement short duration projects. Education has also indicated that as the accounting department, they are doing the global and overarching budget management and shifts according to the outcomes of the risks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teal. I just want to ask at this point in time, Mr. Sally Abrams or Ms. McLean, anything that you would like to add?
Thank you, Chair. From my seat, thanks to you and the committee for the opportunity. The nature of this presentation, as I understood it, focuses largely on the response to the COVID-19 context, and so the immediate information shares within that context. The presentation might not have fully articulated the exact nature of the shifts, so I just wish to add one or two pieces very briefly to that, in that we would have reprioritized budget on the basis of allocating more monies to emergency or corrective maintenance, and that is intended to cover both the emergency responses we needed to put forward in response to vandalism during the lockdown, for example, the storm damage of July 2020, and any other emergency provisions, as we would have noted it, subsequent to bringing children back to school in the context of health and safety. So that's the one input. And then, Chair, just the other input, we continue to reflect on the financial uncertainty and what that might imply for infrastructure planning. Infrastructure planning by its very nature is a multi-year exercise. And so the context of Mr. Teal's presentation is largely focused, the presentation is largely focused on the deliverables for this year. I'm very happy with my colleague, Ms. McGlenn, who is the Chief Director responsible for infrastructure, to talk about our forward planning. But I guess the uncertainty of, not knowing what allocation we'd have in outer years gives the context, as I reported, for example, at the APP sitting, that the deferment or the postponement does not mean cancellation. It means that our typical processes of delivering on our current year commitments, those are maintained, and we continue to adjust and reflect on the timing of endpoint delivery for the projects that are meant to complete in the outer years of this MTF. So I'm very happy to take questions that the committee might have on what the more broader implications might be, but this is a two-pronged process to look at the short-term immediate impact and, of course, how we adjust our significant infrastructure portfolio over the next few years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sally Abrams. Members, you've had the presentation and you have had input now from Mr. Sally Abrams. I am going to afford you an opportunity now to pose questions, and I note firstly Member Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I just wanted to find out what is the process once an infrastructure build is completed. What is the process for inspecting, and is there time given for the schools to identify things that were not done according to good quality standards? And how is that communicated to the department?
Chair, may I answer? Thank you, Honourable Member Bosman. The contract with the contractor places the obligation and the scope of the project to be executed, and our professional team as well as our internal departmental team manages those processes. There is indeed also a maintenance period in terms of contracts, which holds the contractor liable for any latent defects which are not apparent at the time of final completion. And those are usually conveyed by the schools through the circuits, the regions, to WCED's head office. for then to inform ourselves of this and then to go and correct it. After the maintenance period, there will be again an inspection done by the professional service providers with our internal teams and with education's representatives. Usually the circuit manager and the district manager of education will also attend with the infrastructure team members of a Department of Education. Invariably, it also might happen that afterwards there could still be defects, and those are then fed through the communication system of education to the head office of education, Ms. Leslene McLean's unit, which works closely with our units, and we're advised to go and do inspections and identify the cause for any problems, which might be vandalism, it might be quality of work, it could also be failures due to climate and severe storms or whatever, and we handle these accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thiel. I'm just going to take a full round of questions in the next round, and then for you to respond after the round. Is that in order?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take members Alan, Christian, Sayed, and member Nkondlo. Welcome, member Nkondlo and member Mbakamba Bocha.
Chairperson, thank you so much. I can make. Thank
Continue,
you, Chairperson.
member Alan.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the presentation, and I can fully understand that the impact of COVID-19 had and the risk associated. But I wanted to check in terms of the projects that were originally planned but has since been postponed. Of the 95, if I can get a broad overview of how it was decided, it's that 95 or those 95 projects that were planned. If we can get a broad overview of how that determination was done. Thank you.
Thank you, member Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the presentation. Chairperson, I heard the comments of the professional team that goes out to check for defects. Chairperson, if I can just ask, and this is my worry, that we see that sometimes principals are fighting with the service providers because of deficient work. If it can just be explained, how is it that principals get involved with unsatisfactory work done by the contractors? And secondly, if we can just understand these contractors performing and doing infrastructure at our schools, where do they come from? Because we heard that some of the contractors is not locally based, they're outside of this province, and that adds to the problems that we are facing when it comes to attending to the defects of particular schools. If we can just get a clarity on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, member Christians. Member Sayed.
Thank you, Chair, and many thanks to the Department of Public Works as well as the Department of Education for the input. And I want to appreciate that, look, the COVID context has obviously made it difficult to implement much of the projects and to deliver completely. But within that context, I want to ask let me start off from the end, from page 12 to 15. Just wanted to get a sense as to, for each of the postponed projects on slide 15, perhaps if we could, maybe not to give us each, it's going to take a lot of time, but if we can get an idea as to what are the conditions of those schools currently, and when does the department envisage that those projects will commence? Then also, what kind of mechanism, is there a standard policy approach and mechanism that the department has in place to actually monitor the work of contractors. Because I tell you why I'm asking this. For example, Pougedink School in Wellington, school the one that's visited and it's been much in the news. There was apparent shoddy work from a contractor. Then the Department of Education says, no, it's a responsibility of Public Works. Then the contractor fights. So there's and then the school is involved. Then there's a fight. There's always, and there've been numerous examples like this, for example, where you find that there's a tension at times or between the two departments when it comes to the work of the contractor. So I just wanted to get a sense as to what mechanism do we have in place to completely monitor the implementation of work by a contractor, but also what is the role of the Department of Education when it comes to these infrastructure projects? Because we see Public Works implements, but what exact role does the department play, or how do the two departments work together in this regard? Then finally, I just wanted to get a sense around, if you could tell me a bit more around the issue. I don't hear much around safety infrastructure, and particularly the school fences. I just wanted to know, can we get an update with regards to the erecting of the fences at the 30 schools as promised by the Premier in the State of the Province address earlier this year? I just wanted to get an update on that, if that is in your forte or not, but I just wanted to get that update. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everybody. Apologies, I joined the meeting, I think, a couple of minutes late, but thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to understand, firstly, if I can check, in particular due to COVID, including the weather. I see that the school in Nomzamo, in Strands, which was also affected because it still had your prefab structures, is not on the presentation unless I've missed it. If I can get clarity of what is the situation now with that school, because I remember during, I think it was level 3, if not 4, I think the matter was attended to. I think there was an assessment done by the department there. What then is the recourse for the school, and when a permanent solution for that school is gonna come through? That's my first question. And then the second question, I just wanted to check. I think I see Kwafaku Primary School, which I'm assuming is the school in Philippi, which initially was erected with alternative building material, which didn't work. And I'm trying to understand it. I see here there's a June 2020 completion. Is it June 2020, like this year? Does it mean it has been completed, or its first phase? What does that mean? If I can get an understanding, by when is the school going to be finished and handed over to the community? The third question, I think, is on budget. I think on the slide 14, on the budget, I see that the maintenance budget has actually dropped in terms of the post-COVID budget. And I may assume it's part of the issues that were raised that relates to, some of the, deterrence based on the new regulations that needs to be adhered to. But I just want to understand what then becomes the impact, given some of the maintenance pressures, in these schools. What then are some of the implications of such from a budget point of view? And my last one, Chair, I think is linked to member Christians. That given all, I think if we speak about COVID impact, amongst others, in terms of COVID impact, obviously, is the high rate of unemployment where people in communities have lost jobs, given to the lockdown, and therefore are always going to be looking for any opportunity of economic activity in their communities. I just want to find out, I think, in the answer that will be given, relating on how, who are these service providers and how they get to be appointed, and what is the level of adherence, in particular to the 30% local participation. How does that work in terms of the department, especially now, given, I think, some of the experiences we've seen, in some of the infrastructure projects in communities where, members of the community will hold a project at ransom, demanding jobs, demanding local subcontracting and stuff like that, which may have a dire impact and cost implications, because some of those now gets to be delayed in renegotiating. What then is the standard practice in relation to what has happened, especially on your emergency maintenance, and some of the schools that have to be rebuilt. And I'm assuming those have already been contracted, because especially your replacement schools, if you can just explain that process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Sayed, your hand is still up. Is that for a next question?
No, sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to double check that it is not for the next question. I just want to ask, and I'm asking my question first to Public Works, the Lentegeur Secondary School. We did an oversight visit as the standing committee during June this year, and they were busy with piping, digging to lay new pipes for the toilets. And then there was a risk that that perimeter wall had collapsed at a time. And I just want to know what is the status update of that. And then the unrest that was in the Milnerton area, in the Joe Slovo Park area, in regard to the damages to the Makoni Beam Primary School, as well as the Sinenjongo High School. If you could speak to what is the status of that infrastructure there now. And then I want to know, during the COVID period, were there any schools that did not have running water or appropriate sanitation infrastructure? And then you spoke about, in one of your slides, you spoke to the the postponements of the infrastructure projects. And I would want to know what, and maybe Mr. Sali Abrams could answer me on this one, what impact this postponement would have on the academic year 2021, with taking into account the migration of learners from other provinces, and what is the contingency plan attached to, and then if these completion dates does not materialize, what is the contingency plans? And then that is the round of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I might need to pass the questions as I've written them down also to my colleagues in WCED Education, in view of being responsible for some of the decisions or the considerations around those. And I'll then start off with the first question. Is that in order?
That is in order, Mr. Teal. You may go ahead, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Honourable Member Allen, the question was the considerations or criteria for the stopping of the 95 projects. Here I can confirm that the assessment when projects need to be done takes into consideration the status of the buildings, which are done by means of condition assessments and site visits. And we tried with education to identify critical elements, which when it does not get attended to might cause the school's functionality to be compromised and then affecting the ability for education to continue uninterruptedly. And it's a prioritization model taking into account electricity, water supply, sewerage, also roofing so that there's no water leaks, and other items that might cause physical harm or injury. And for example, painting would be a lesser priority, but electricity would be a high priority. This we discussed with education, which has got the very difficult position to then allocate the limited funding accordingly. But in terms of how the specific schools have been identified, I would ask education if they would like to provide more information other than the technical considerations that I've just explained now. Shall we handle up, Chair?
Yes, Mr. Thiel.
Thank you, Chair. Then, Honourable Member Christians, the defects and the fighting that often occurs on sites. It is not unusual that in this particular case, when we talk about existing schools, that there's a very keen interest by school communities and school principals as well as school governing bodies in the new project that is usually there to replace an existing inappropriate facility. However, the way in which we handle that is by means of contract. So our department is the responsible department to procure. We enter into contracts with our PSPs in the first place that designs and prepares the tender documentation, and then assists with the evaluation of the tender, where after our department through our supply chain management units evaluates the tender and then decides on an award. And then the contracts are managed by our professional service provider under our own direction, and the contractor has to comply and oblige according to the scope of the contract and the quality standards determined in the tender documentation. Obviously, in an ideal world, this would be perfect, but it's not. So there are 2 weekly meetings on all sites, and there are also inspections for specific kinds of work that being done before it's covered up or completed, or otherwise there might be sampling required. In other words, samples are erected, considered by the professional team with our own teams of the Department of Transport and Public Works. And I can confirm that education's representative for that particular project also attends these meetings and is usually also a technical person from educational side. And once the samples are approved, the contractor is required to deliver the work according to those standards. If any other work during the 2 weekly meetings are identified as unsatisfactory or unacceptable, instructions are issued in terms of the provisions of the contract for this work to be remedied. And in the case that it's not apparent, then it becomes a latent defect, which might either become apparent during the construction period or afterwards, for which the contract also allows fixes to be applied during the maintenance period. And there's also a 10-year guarantee for substandard work and material and components that might not have complied to the specification in the tender documentation. And these are usually followed up ad hoc on the notification of the schools to education, which brings it under our attention. And then we do our own inspections with our own inspector and then follow up with PSPs and with the contractor by issuing instructions in terms of the contracts. The expectations of all of these parties might not always be exactly the same, but we revert back to contract data to the provisions and the obligations and rights in terms of contracts, as well as obviously the roles and responsibilities that the various departmental officials has, and then also in terms of accountability. So contractually, our department runs the contracts, and WCED runs the responsibility of managing us as their implementing agent. I trust this might assist. I'm just having a look here. 12 to 15, the condition of the schools was another defects. Okay, contractors outside of the province. Okay, the other question was indeed that we do the supply chain management process is an open, competitive process, which is open and free for all contenders in the province, the region, the province, and actually also in South Africa to contend. The preference points takes into account the location of the contractor, and that gets added to their points. And obviously the highest point scoring contractor in terms of BEE principles as well usually gets awarded the contract, and there are very rarely any exceptions to this unless there's a higher risk of non-delivery. So we do have a number of contracts that might deploy contractors that are from other parts of the country. We do have successful delivery also amongst those that are from other parts of the country. But I must say that it is not the general norm that the tender results requires the award to outside companies, if I can say so. The norm is really for local companies to because they are competitive and can do it usually at lower prices. I trust those are the two questions that need to be covered for Member Christians. Then Member Syed. Apologies there. Slides, the condition of the schools that we are replacing. They obviously are in need of replacement, but with education's notification system of defects or failure, we continue to keep them functioning and occupiable, but they obviously are not ideal and desire to continue indefinitely. We would like to complete the new buildings as quickly as possible in terms of the contract periods, to allow the old schools then to be demolished and that the projects can be completed. The mechanism to control and monitor, I think I've also tried to explain to the previous question, the 2 weekly visiting of sites, and also when particular trades of work are being done, also with the samples being built on site. I do agree that there might even be in this mechanism some items that slip through. However, we will always return and demand the obligations to be executed by the contractor when it is required. The item number 3 was the role of education. Obviously here my colleagues will be able to expand. Our role is to receive the needs, the technical needs from my colleague Lesline McGlen-Artendorf, and then to implement those in terms of design specifications, tender documentation, procurement, and then the construction on site, and managing it through its maintenance period, and then be on standby should anything go wrong. In terms of the safety of schools and the fencing program, I believe that education will be able to expand in full on that. Member Syed. Then Member Nkondlo, Nomzamo Strand, the members might be aware that those were fixed within 1 week and that occupation was again possible for the schools when they opened on that particular next week. The current situation is stable and the school is indeed functioning. And I need to just note that those were excessive weather conditions and cannot be ascribed to any substandard work at all. Unfortunately, buildings are not completely safe from the worst weather conditions, and particularly mobiles are not the same as permanent structures. In terms of the permanent solution for the Nomzamo school, I believe that education will answer that for us, particularly in terms of prioritization and the probability of funding in the future. The Kwafaku school, it was occupied in June this year, but the second phase of completing the site works and getting that ready is continuing. It was a particularly difficult site, which was small and had to be done in a number of phases. Then the budget slide 14 with the maintenance budgets that have dropped. It is indeed so, and it does cause some concern, but we'll have to be agile and resilient in terms of keeping existing facilities functioning and safe to occupy for educational purposes. It might also be that education would like to comment on that. And then the economic activity, which will obviously be a high priority for local communities, particularly where there are hardships and suffering resulting from COVID. We are still continuing with the objectives of job creation and employment. These are done by studies on empowerment impact assessment, where the targets are identified. These are all contained in our projects, and it's tightly controlled by means of contractual obligations that the contractor has. And there's also close collaboration with the project steering committee, in which the community members may be present, assisting in the identification of individuals that would get the benefit of employment and jobs. Obviously, these are limited. The hopes and the needs are much, much higher than what can be delivered in such a contract, but it is working fairly well, although dissatisfaction do flare up quite often, which do affect the progress on site, and we usually have to manage very carefully around such situations. I trust, Chair, that I did not miss anything, but please, if I missed anything or need to be reminded of something by a member, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teal. I'm going to ask then Ms. McGlee or Mr. Sali. Any responses from your side?
Okay, if I can just suggest that I answer the questions that were for education, and maybe I'll then hand over to Mr. Abrams to, to supplement what he wants to at the end, because there were some questions specifically for education.
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay? Okay. So I just want to, there were a couple of references made to how the departments work together. So I just wanted to add a little bit on to, to clarify and close that out. As Mr. Teal explained, the Department of Transport and Public Works deal with the contract and any contractual matters. And so education deals is the face of education and deals with liaising with the school and between the school and Department of Transport and Public Works. So we try to do communications, any facilitation that is required with the school, and to minimize the school getting into some of the situations that were described earlier. We try to assist and take over that function and deal with Public Works on behalf of the school. We try to listen to the school's needs and then deal with any queries that come up, and the infrastructure unit is the middleman between the school and Public Works, just to give a little bit on that. And then Honourable Member Sayed asked about the fencing. So we do have a 5-year plan for the fencing, and the fencing for projects for this year, there were 3 that were under threat and we weren't sure if they were going to happen. Of the 30 that were planned for 2020, they are now under construction, and they will be completed. So all 30 for 2020 are on track. And just to say that going forward, we will have to review it. We're trying to adopt a long-term view to stabilize the budget and take away some of the volatility, which is not easy, as we don't know. We can't predict the future, but we are trying to predict as much as we can so that we can stabilize and not move projects around too much. So we can't guarantee that the fencing for 21 onwards will still happen, and that is under review. But 2020 definitely is committed, and 27 of the projects are near completion and 3 are in construction and will be complete by March 2021. Then Member Nkondlo asked about Nomzamo and the mobile school. The permanent school is on the cards. It has been delayed a little bit, but it is on the cards. The issue that we have there is that there is a school planned for that area, and any learners from the mobile school may apply to that school. But with the huge need that we have in that area, I don't know if we'll be able to eradicate the mobile school, because then we'll probably sit with unplaced learners. So it's, the situation is dire, but the permanent school is on the cards. It's not been cancelled or moved. And then Kofaku, Mr. Thiel explained about Kofaku. The school is occupied, and it's the sports field that we're busy completing at this point, and that is on track for completion in this year. Then just to explain the maintenance and the projects that were moved, how do we choose them, the 95 projects and the other projects? It's an amount of 485 million that we had to find in the budget to cut. So that's not a small amount. And it took a lot of consideration. Many of the projects that had been committed already and were in construction. So, I mean, the maintenance, we decided after long deliberation to defer the 2020 projects to 2021. That was the final. They had not been committed, they had not commenced, and we deferred them to 2021 along with the other replacement schools. So it's a balance between growth for accommodating new learners next year, the condition of the schools, the replacement of schools which desperately need to be replaced. There were no easy choices that we could cut the 485 million from. And then Mr. Thiel answered some of the questions on communities, but we have had severe delays. Stoffland is one example, was very difficult in the beginning with communities making demands. Wallace Dean Primary School is delayed because of land invasion, and we're waiting for the city to relocate the invaders before we can continue with the school. So it's a humane, we have to have a humane approach, but we also want to deliver the schools and give the learners the opportunities they deserve. So the community challenges that we face are growing. I mean, Grabouw went reasonably well and recently also experienced some serious incidents. So we're watching that project carefully, and a number of projects. You know, we have the same issues where people have expectations for jobs. I mean, that expectation has now quadrupled after COVID. So we have to manage the situation and try and provide opportunities for jobs, as that is the province's goal, and yet deliver what we need to deliver. Then Honourable Member Botha asked about Lentegeur. The sewer pipe was being replaced at Lentegeur and the wall did collapse. It has now been replaced with a new section of wall, and the new sewer has been completed. The damage that happened due to the vandalism at Sinenjongo and Makoni Beam has not been repaired due to financial constraints. We are working with a donor on the Sinenjongo Hall and hope that the donor will contribute to the repairs and so that we may proceed with that. And we are trying to schedule the Makoni Beam repairs into a maintenance project. But it's at the moment with the funding as it stands, it's not scheduled yet. And then you were asking if there were any schools during COVID that had no running water. There were various challenges with schools, but let me start with the 3 schools that were awaiting permanent water connections. They did not have running water. So we installed water tanks and filled the tanks up with water so that there was always water available at those 3 schools. 2 of them have now got their permanent water connections, and 1 of them, it is in process. It is a huge challenge, and anybody in the room who can assist us with the municipality to speed up water and service connections, we would appreciate any assistance in that regard. Yeah, so that's it from me. If Mr. Abrams would like to just top up anything that I've missed.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just augment my colleagues' inputs. I think certainly from my perspective, it would be important to note that we do have in the Western Cape a schools infrastructure system that is in rapid decline. We, through the Department of Public Works as the custodian for the, let's call it an asset base, it's in financial value, a 75 billion rand asset base that needs maintenance, and we are not close to the prescribed numbers of projects and maintenance activity that we need to do, given largely budget shortfalls. It's within that context, Chair, that I would share that, you know, it was a deficient point to start off with, and COVID has just illuminated the need for us to find more relevant strategies to addressing the need. Our scheduled maintenance projects, even before the COVID lockdown, had been reduced to only tackling, again for limited budget reasons, tackling those critical components like roofs, water and electrical and plumbing, and indeed any other critical component that supports the functionality of schooling. And that would have led to some of the dissatisfaction that principals might have, who might have expected that a more broader maintenance regime be applied, in the way that there's a dire need also to look at, you know, non-critical components like just, you know, access pathways and, you know, windowsills windows not operating, etc. But for financial reasons, we're limited in that regard. I make that point because I think as we go forward, Honourable Member Botha, to your questions, I think I'd wanted to share that the immediate needs is around stabilizing. The immediate needs is water and sanitation. We didn't, as Ms. McGlenn says, we've got a fairly secure water supply to all of our schools, bar the new mobile schools. It is not our intent to continue to flood our environment with more mobile schools. We know it's not a sustainable arrangement, and we have to manage very clear expectations around the pace at which we replace as we would have made the promise on Mzamo, there are a number of schools that are built up exclusively of mobile schools. And of course, we have in excess of 74 schools that still have been in part built with inappropriate material. So the replacement school agenda is one that continues to occupy our mind, but it's competing at the moment with the maintenance of the broader set of school infrastructure. And as you point out, Honourable Member Botha, the growth plans. What are the implications? We continue to ring fence new assets and the build of new schools in Witsands and for Santakral particularly. We continue to commit to prioritizing the projects that are in flight, the capital works projects, to create spaces for 2021. And we will, with Public Works, have refined the list to where our confidence are highest that we are going to deliver. And that also adds to the questions around what will we do in terms of accountability. We are fairly confident that the ones in flight now at the moment, Chair, are the ones we'll pursue with. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Members, any follow-up questions to the responses you received from your initial questions asked? Member Bosman?
Chair, Chair, thank you very much. I just wanted to go back to my initial question. So can we assume that the build for Crestway Secondary School is completed and that all the maintenance checks would have been done?
That school was only recently completed, so it is completed, but all of the maintenance periods have not expired yet. Mr. Thiel can correct me, but so there will still be, we have not, it hasn't been through final completion. So no, all the maintenance hasn't been completed yet. Some of the snags are still being completed. It's reached practical completion, but not final completion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thiel, you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, final completion is actually wrapping up of any work on the sites, and then it's really the administration of the payment, which follows another 3 months later, and then any latent defects can be attended to. So unfortunately, I don't dispose over the finest detail, but with confidence in terms of the way in which we handle projects, I can confirm that with practical completion, the school is safely occupiable and functional, and we will attend in the remaining 3 months of the maintenance periods to any exceptions, defects that might come alight.
Thank you. Member Nkondlo, you have lowered your hand now.
No, Chair, so my apologies. Chair, my follow-up, I think, is on 2 matters. One, can I get the specifics of saying if the school of Nomzamo is on the cards, what does that mean in terms of timeframes? Because I'm sure as a person who is a constituency head there, it will help me when such a question arises, because it seems it's in the replacement schools list, but can I get an indication by when is the schools expected to be built in there? The second one, I think, is on the question of managing, I think, the current pressures, you know, that are compounded by COVID around the economic benefit in the schools community. I hear that, yes, the department is in conversation to try and find solutions. Can we at least be given some kind of tangible sort of solutions, if any, or if there is still a process of dialogue on how to sort of, you know, find ways to deal with those current pressures? Is there such a process? You know, I hear that there is a commitment to engage, but the problem is here and now, and we are on level 1. And I think post-COVID, we all have been saying, anticipating that there should be mechanisms that are put in place to try and deal with the pressure. So I'm trying to get some kind of a specific answer, if indeed there is any work that the department is doing in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thiel, Ms. McGlade.
Chair, thank you. The timelines on Nomzamo, education will be better placed to answer that particular one. On the any process to deal with the current pressure, unfortunately, under the current circumstances of continuing and promoting the projects of the past and of the present, the same principles applies. There are no additional jobs or alleviation programs being initiated by within the education program as funded by education, and it may be noted that any funding for additional to the current bricks mortar labor and artisan work would obviously place more pressure on the infrastructure budget, but it is understandable that the needs in the communities are dire.
Thank you, Ms. McLean.
It's very difficult to commit to dates with the volatility and uncertainty. So Nomzamo is at the moment in the budget. It's only in planning, and it's a big site, so there's more than one school planned for that site. We are trying to phase the primary school so that we can, but there's a lot of work left to do still, so that we can deliver it in phases, in a junior phase and a senior phase, to make more opportunities available earlier, instead of building a whole primary school and waiting for the school to be complete. But at this stage, even that, nothing will be complete before 2023 at least. And in 2023, it would be part of the primary school, but it is a phased approach. It's a big site, and we're trying to phase it. And if the budget weren't affected, we could do it in bigger chunks. But everything is affected because it's severe budget cuts. 27% this year. We're expecting somewhere in the region of 30% next year. Now, 27 plus 30, and the middle year of the MTEF we're expecting even bigger cuts. So it is not fair of me to sit here and make promises knowing that, they will have to be reviewed on a regular basis. I'm trying to be transparent and realistic at the same time.
Thank you very much. Member Sayed.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the responses. I just wanted to ask, I've been made aware of there's the Vieja KSE de Villiers Church in Harold, right? And I've been raising this matter with the department and even in the legislature. I just wanted to get a sense if I could get some more info. In which they basically instructed the department that the church took a decision to sell the property on which the Franken Primary School is situated. I just wanted to understand what steps will the Department of Education take basically in response to this. Has the department looked at this, and will the department take up the offer will it take up the offer to buy the property? That's with that. I just wanted some more info on that. Then, with regards to the classrooms that are overcrowded, COVID-19 has exposed greatly the problems we've got in terms of the overcrowded classrooms. I didn't hear much about classrooms. Can we get a sense as to what are the plans to address the challenge regarding overcrowded classrooms? Thank you. That was it from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Abram, shall I give that to you, or is it Ms. McLean?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take those two questions. I think thank you to the members for the questions. On the Franken issue, the department is, the question was, what are the processes? We are engaged with the local community and a number of stakeholders. We have been provided with the details of that sale referred to. The site is quite small, Member Said. We are interested in continuing education in that part of the province. And so we are evaluating it. It seems positive that we'll want to take up that offer, but I cannot confirm that's subject to confirmation. There's another school in close proximity, so we need to do a thorough evaluation of the education plan going forward. There isn't there isn't opportunity to develop that, broaden, expand it, etc., given some of the site limitations, but we are evaluating it on merit, and we will have a decision on that ratified within the next few weeks. Actually, I think we're moving quite quickly on that one. On the matter of overcrowded schools, I mean, I think that's the best context that illuminates where we're prioritizing. Notwithstanding the pressures we had prior to COVID, but COVID has also in the health and safety context necessitated that we review as we implement the revised education plans, but certainly going forward, what are our best assumptions around our ability to relieve the existing service delivery pressure in overcrowded classrooms? We have a number of schools that have, looking at the enrollment plans for next year, accepted even more children. I think it exacerbates the problem. But we've ring-fenced monies now, members say it through the chair, to alleviate service delivery pressure, particularly in Metro East. And so we're making a very specific call on relieving pressure that we think is, beyond the, acceptable limits, of course. So relieving that doesn't necessarily mean creating more capacity. These are overcrowded classrooms where the site can handle temporary classroom revisions, or, as Ms. McGlenn is prioritizing, expanding with brick and mortar in Metro East. Our first objective is to ensure the safety and the health and space, I should add, for those learners. So we can't do it everywhere in the way that we relieve that pressure, but on a district by district basis, we are using the data to guide us. And then I think just almost a principle, if not an outright policy position. I mean, we are concerned that by the likes of places like the hotspots of Grabouw, where we are seeing enrollments reach 2,000. I think we're very worried about that. And obviously our contingency planning is to make sure that there are appropriate spaces for teaching and learning, if not on that site and then elsewhere. But the exact nature of the investment into more classroom space, it is now our unit of analysis in terms of expanding existing schools with more classroom capacity, the availability of land, the very contentious issue of priority of land needs, makes us look more deeply at the existing schools and expanding those. That would be our strategy to relieve on a place-by-place basis the pressure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Abrams. Member Bosman, I note you. I just want to ask Mr. Abrams, in addition to what Member Sayed just asked, we did an oversight visit at Mandlam-Kosi Secondary School. So I'm just wanting to know whether this school is on your radar as well in terms of mobile classrooms, because for now they are utilizing the church opposite the school to create an extra classroom for the learners in regard to adhering to the COVID-19 regulations. And then also Hillcrest. Is Hillcrest on your radar?
For both of those schools, Chair, if I may respond, certainly in the area is. So we're looking at this obviously at the classroom needs where we need to relieve the pressure. I will confirm, if I may, Chair, on those two schools itself. We've got a list of 140 schools that have conditions the like of which you just expressed. And so I can confirm back, but I think my immediate response would be, in the areas served by Mandlam-Kosi and Hillcrest for that matter, we understand the pressure in those particular areas and that it would be on our list. But the exact number of mobile classrooms to relieve the pressure, I couldn't set that expectation just yet whilst we finalize the allocation for 2021. Happy to revert.
Okay. Will the committee be privy to have that list?
Yes, we will publish, because I think the demand far outstrips the supply, Madam Chair. So we will produce a list of where we will create the capacity through additional classroom allocation to both help with the space situation, But as I say, to relieve these conditions where the word instruction room takes on a very different meaning. It's unacceptable that, children and teachers, of course, operate in some of the makeshift conditions that, whilst one could argue is unavoidable, we still don't think it's a situation that we need to let it be. So it's of the highest prioritization. We'll share that list with you, and your cross-referencing to your own observations will help. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Member Bosman, just a bit of more of indulgence. I just want to ask Ms. McLean, in regard to that schools that you refer to, when I posed a question around the running water, you alluded to some schools. Are you able to furnish us with that list of that few schools?
Do you want me to tell you the 3 schools, or do you want me to?
You can.
Okay. It's Washington Drive Primary School, Sunridge Circle Primary School, and the third one is Fairdale Primary School.
Okay.
And so Sunridge is the one. Sunridge, we are just busy with the connection now. The other 2 have their connection sorted out.
Okay. Thank you very much. Member Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I just want to go back to the list in terms of once a school is completed, what are those sort of maintenance items? If colleagues could perhaps just list what are those snag items, would that include leakages when it rains, cracks in the walls and the floors, door handles breaking and constantly needing to be replaced, window handles breaking, and if there's insufficient gutters and the school is constantly filled with rain, are those the types of items that is fixed? And I'm using Crestway Secondary as an example. Specifically, are those the items that are still going to be repaired at that school? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think those items that Member Bosman has noted will get the attention it requires and needs to be fixed. For example, if insufficient gutting or insufficient water removal might be the cause of it, it might be either a design defect or an omission or a missing of a particular characteristic, and it might actually require an adjustment of the design. But all of those matters are covered by the contract or by the design process, and will get the necessary attention when it is brought under the attention of education. We have covered it then in according to our processes and the way in which we solve these problems, and then implement them through the contractor and with the assistance of the PSPs that are responsible for design and specification under our guidance and control.
Thank you. Member Bosman, your hand is still up.
Sorry, Chair, that's an oversight on my part. I will lower it now.
All right, thank you. Member Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check if we can get perhaps once these engagements with these communities have been done, can the report of what comes out of those reports, out of those engagements, can that report be shared with us? And what are the implications in terms of, policy review or any related, especially from the socio-economic benefits at a local level is concerned? And I'm not sure whether those are being led by the Department of Education or both with Public Works. But if we can just get an indication of when such are concluded, if the report of those engagement could be shared. Then the other thing I wanted to get some clarity or insight from either the 2 departments is what becomes, I think I just consider, and it's just one issue, but that is the Kwafaku school. But now in relation to COVID, the challenges of manufacturing, and the broad, economy, what then becomes, the future of the ABTs, that is your alternative building technologies. I'm raising this one in relation to Kwafaku, which moved from an ABT and now had to put it back on brick and mortar, assuming that is trying to meet up with our climate change obligations. That is why I think, I'm not sure whether there is a percentage, but I'm assuming that there is a percentage of trying, to moderate and try and get us, to that level in terms of alternative building material. So I just want to get an insight now, because now beyond just, whether we do have existing proven alternative building solutions, the challenge now is the manufacturing capacity because of COVID and closing down of the economy. So if I can get some clarity or input, if there has been any discussion around the future of ABT, in terms of schools infrastructure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member Nkondlo, for the questions. Education might also be able to shed some light on some pilots that have been done by Department of Education. We are currently in talks on a standardization of design and also then the standardization of various construction systems. But as Honourable Member Nkondlo has noted, it does come with risks, and it usually is best to pilot as opposed to roll out on a broad scale, and also to allow for enough time for this to stand the test of time. We do have teams engaging currently, and there has been some dealings with the CSIR, where there is a unit on alternative building technology. But Leslie and I have not yet identified specific projects and specific budgets for the implementation. It is still in the research and investigation stage. And as the member has noted, it is an important matter to support the sustainability of the environment, but also sustainability of the educational facilities for the permanent educational environment.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, continue. Apology.
On the engagement with communities, I don't want to create a wrong impression. When I refer to the PSCs, the project steering committees, these are bodies that are created on all construction projects to enable the contractor and our department to follow the targeted objectives of job creation and employment. And they do not deal with any additional needs or for that particular function, there is no other program identified. So through the chair, Member Nkondlo, currently there is no joint additional program under consideration or deployed for more jobs or further employment other than those that are already defined in the current contract data and the obligations that goes concurrently is shared then with the contractor to employ those members from labour, artisans, suppliers and manufacturers.
Thank you. Ms. McLean, you want to add to that specific?
No, Chair. I think
okay.
As Mr. Teal said, it's not a specific separate action that we can report on. So I think what the member was asking, can we submit reports specifically on job creation? It is done as the contract progresses through the progress site meetings.
Okay. I note members Syed and Christians. I just want to ask, in regard, we also did an oversight visit a while ago to the Veldrift High School, where the report was given by the principal that the contractor who was on site at the time to do some maintenance has upped and gone in the middle of the project. I just want to know, in regard to that example, How many have we had within the last 2 financial years, and what is or was the loss in rand value, and how do we get those monies paid to those contractors who has not finished the job? How do we get those monies back, and was there any successes in getting monies back from that kind of contractors? Mr. Teal?
Can I come in there? I did some
Yes,
work
sure.
on that project. Just to say that the contractor was not paid, and so there have been some contractors. I can't tell you offhand how many in the past 2 years, but there have been some. But the contractor is only paid for what he did. So the contractors do not get paid for work they haven't done. So from a financial loss point of view, that particular contractor was not.
Children in the Western Cape, as she presented.
Member Bosman, please put yourself on mute.
Resources. Ms. Christina Nomdo has successfully engaged and partnered with 35.
Member Bosman, please mute yourself. We're hearing you talk in another meeting. Thank you. Ms. McLean, yeah.
Okay, so if you want, we can submit after the meeting, how many contractors did not successfully complete where we had to cancel, because then we would cancel and ensure that no further monies are paid and employ a new contractor. So it is an inconvenience and a delay more than a financial implication.
And that is taken into account when that particular contractor would want to tender for a next job.
Definitely.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Member Said?
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you very much to Mr. Abrams for the response on the Franken matter. I just want to follow up, because from the response now I'm gathering just a few concerns. Firstly, I just wanted to follow up and see if there's any possibility then of closing down the school and moving learners to nearby schools. That's the one thing I wanted to check. Then also, Mr. Abrams indicated that the department are busy engaging with the community and engaging with stakeholders. What I get a sense is that no decision has yet been taken. So could we get the gist of those discussions and whether they may lead to closure of the actual school? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abrams, sorry, are you going to respond to that follow-up question?
Yes, I would do so. I think thanks, Chair. I think there are two aspects to that conversation. At the moment, it's very much a technical conversation around what is being sold off and why. There are ongoing operational matters, I would say, and the responsibility for maintaining the environment, building walls, etc. So there are a range of infrastructure issues that it's occupying our mind in the first instance, which is day job stuff for us, Chair. The wider matter of how do we ensure continuity for learning and for education in that particular area. The conversation around the stakeholder engagement, like I said, is around the sale. There are other interested parties, and we're thinking about how we continue to invest in that particular area and expand that particular school, and finding opportunities to create awareness.
Mr. Abrams, have we lost you? It seems we have lost Mr. Abrams. A member said we'll come back to that response. Member Christians?
Thank you, Chair. You have touched the point, and Member Said as well. You have alluded to the extra mobile classrooms, but I just want to, and you spoke about it, but I just want to take us back to to Hillcrest again, because the problem at Hillcrest is not extra classrooms, is that they have requested that there's an additional high school built in Mossel Bay, and especially in the Asla community. We know when we visited, we were there twice, and when we visited, when it's inclement weather, 50% of the learners does not attend because it's too costly to use transport. So I just want to know, is the department looking at assisting Mossel Bay with the extra high school, and especially in the Asla community, moving away from, there's only so much, because they gave us their targets, and they, they are full. And of course, the pressure is on the principal to perform when it comes to results. But I mean, I can't remember the figures, but they way above what they had. And they said, we really need another high school in Mossel Bay. If that can just be addressed, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McLean, I don't think that Mr. Abrams is on again. Mr. Abrams? Okay. No, I don't think. Okay. Will so you attempt to respond? Yes, please.
Yes, Chair, I'll answer Houtbay. So we do have again, I mean, I can't stress enough about the certainty and volatility, but so whatever I answer is what we have currently in the plans, and we do have a high school in the budget. Planning, I think, starts in the middle year of the MTEF for a high school in Mossel Bay. So there is a high school, and we are looking at if we can bring that forward so that the planning can commence next year. But none of that has been finalized. But there is a school in the planning, in the MTEF, starting planning in the MTEF for Mossel Bay. It's a technical high school. It's at this point, and it must be finalized as to what type of school. But we've got a technical high school penciled in at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Member Christians, does that satisfy your question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Member Said, Mr. Abrams is not on, so we're going to have to put that question of yours that has not been fully answered. We'll put that in the recommendations, if it's okay with you.
That's fine with me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Just lower your hand, please, Member Said. Thank you. Then Member Nkondlo, I see your mic is on and off all the time. Is there still a question that you would want to pose?
No, my apologies, Chair. I didn't lower my hand.
Thank you very much. Members, is that then all the questions for this afternoon to the departments? I take that as a yes. I want to say to both departments who has joined us, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for answering the questions that we have had to you. At this point in time, I'm going to ask whether you still have some closing remarks, Mr. Thiel and Ms. McGlynn, before I say goodbye to both of you.
Thank you very much, Chair. No more questions and comments from our side.
Thank you, sir. Ms. McLean?
No, thank you, Chair. I don't have anything else. If the members don't, then that's all from me.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McLean and Mr. Thiel. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Go well.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you,
Members, let's to our concluding administrative tasks. I'm going to ask of you any recommendations. Member Allen, I'm starting with you.
Chairperson,
yes.
I'm covered. I have nothing at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bosman.
Chair, can I ask that the committee conducts an unannounced visit to Crestway Senior Secondary to check on the first phase and to see what those different stages of repairs that are still needing to take place are?
Sure. Member Christians?
Chair, yes, I think we must just follow up on that Mossel Bay High School and maybe just see, because they're mentioning a technical high school, but I didn't want to belabor the point, but I think we were all there and they need a school in Asla. If we can maybe just ask them, you know, and maybe after consultation with the communities out there or whoever they need to consult, but that they locate the school at the right place. And secondly, if we can maybe just have that, you know, they said in next year, I think. So if we can just maybe just ask them to give us a presentation on maybe certain stuff, but that's urgent, like Hillcrest. It's urgent that we push this matter and that the right high school is built there and not one that, you know. So, Chair, it's just my thoughts, but I just think let's because the principal, you know, he was very sincere when he said Asla needs a high school. So maybe we can persuade. I don't know, Chair.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Member Christians. Member Sayed.
Chair, I think I'm covered if the question that I posed around Franken, if I'll just get those responses from Mr. Abrams. I think, yeah, just writing. Then I'm covered. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Nkondlo. Member Mitchell.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I think I'm not sure whether the Committee on Education would have the list of the schools that are still, I think, in the department's radar regarding replacement schools. Because one, if that list exists, I would really just request to be shared to just follow up on the matter of the school in Strand. That's one, Chair. The second one, which I think also could be shared, is the PSP framework or the local participation framework of the Department of Public Works as it relates to both building of new schools, including, you know, the maintenance. If there is any policy or guidelines that gets to be followed by the PSPs, as it was explained, I think, by some of the senior officials. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Member Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing from my side.
Okay, thank you. Wasima, I'm putting it back to you just to read back in regard to all the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So what I've captured from the members thus far and what they've given us now is Member Bosman requests an unannounced visit to Hillcrest Secondary School to look at all the snags and maintenance that still needs to be done. And then Member Christians has requested that we do a follow-up regarding the Mossel Bay High School in relation to them saying that it's a technical school, but that the request was for school to be in the Asla area, as that is the need at the moment in the Mossel Bay area. And then also Member Sayed request that the Franklin's questions be answered from the department as Mr. Abrams left the meeting before answering those questions. And then Member
I think it was not voluntary leaving the meeting. I think he was disconnected.
I think so too, Chair.
Yeah.
And then Member Nkondlo's request for the list of schools, replacement schools, as well as a follow-up of the school in Strand, which Member Nkondlo alluded to throughout the meeting in the questions, as well as requesting the PSP framework, as well as policy and guidelines for new schools to be supplied to the committee. I've also captured three other recommendations. One is the 140 schools listed for mobile classrooms. Once the budget is completed, that list be furnished to the committee, as well as the how many contractors did not complete their work during the financial period, to list the number of contracts as well as the schools and the districts that they fall within, and the reports with regards to the engagement with communities around implementing new schools.
Okay. Members, is that the essence of the recommendations? Are you in agreement?
Chair, can I just on the policies, so that the department is not confused? It's specific. It's a policy on the local beneficiation during the construction or the maintenance of the school. So because there are many policies, if we just say policies, they may end up not knowing which one specifically. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Wasima, you have it like that?
Yes, Chair.
Then I just want to ask, in regard to Member Bosman's recommendation for a visit to Crestway, how soon are we able to do it, Wasima, in our program?
Chair, I'll have to check availability on the program. I know there's an opening in November, but I will check the program and come back to you on that.
Okay, all right, that's fine with me. Members, then that is our recommendations, and that is also our meeting for today. Anything else, Wasima, you want to add? I see that you put on your mic and then switched off.
No, Chair. I'm covered.
It's me. It's Chair, it's Member Makamba Bocha. I just need to say I'm in a meeting. However, I'm covered with everything that was discussed.
Thank you, Member. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Member Nkondlo, your hand is raised. Member Nkondlo?
Technology is dealing with me, Chair. Okay. As I try and lower it down, it goes up. Apologies.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Members, then the Wasima?
Yes, Chair.
Anything you still want to add?
No, I'm covered. I've captured everything from the members.
Okay. All right, members, then that leaves me to say thank you to Wasima for putting together the logistics for this meeting to happen, and then also for Mr. Ben Daza, who assisted, and then also our IT staff. I see Tafsir in the meeting, and if it's not for Tafsir, it cannot happen, even though Wasima and Ben puts it together. So thank you very much, Tafsir. And then members, thank you very much for joining me in the Standing Committee meeting. Go well.